That's nice. All right, round two. About to get started. All right, so I have a couple quick announcements. I spent the morning talking about my Twitter account, which I appreciate for those of you that follow me. Now my Instagram account is lagging. So if you guys can help catch me up, I take really good pictures. Really exciting stuff. Important note, though, I just saw the one and only Jessica Knatzer, former Stylecaster JTM here. So I think one of the cool things about this, one of our isms, our core values at Stylecaster, we always say family first, right? You're part of the family. That's why I love when we do events, because it's very clear who's in the family and who's not. And so first and foremost, I want to welcome all you guys to the family. As I tell my immediate family members, whether you like it or not, now we're family. But it really is the community that we're trying to build that you guys are a part of, whether it's online or offline or at the events, the conversations you guys are having. We really do believe that you guys are the future, and we're happy to consider you family. I see my brother eating. Hey, D. That's David Goldberg, everybody. All right, so quick thing, Rachel Siegel, Stylecaster Community Manager. I was asking Aliza, I didn't know if like the social media people are still incognito. Remember when they all started, like they didn't want anybody to know who they are? So that's Rachel Siegel. She's the amazing voice behind @Stylecaster. Siegs, what I want you to do is I want you to tweet where the live stream is available right now on stylecaster.com. And then I want all you guys to retweet it. Because again, the idea of Style to the People is we're very privileged that we get to be in New York right now at this event, but there's a lot of people that wanted to be here that couldn't. So I want you guys to spread that word, make sure people know that it's available. So with that, the reason you're going to do that is because this is one of the panels that I was most excited about. You guys have all eaten. Hopefully you're feeling great. We're going to talk about the anatomy of fashion, and I'm going to run through the caliber of talent on this stage right now is extremely humbling. When we started and we put the word out for the event, we got this email, and somebody was like, this guy, Simon Collins, would like to participate. I was like, are you kidding? So the Dean of Parsons, far and away, I think one of the best fashion schools in the world right now, is here to moderate this panel, which I'm very, very excited about. Mr. Rassi from Milk Studios, I'm sure all of you guys at this point know Milk. They really are the people at the forefront, especially the indie fashion movement, the things they're doing during Fashion Week. They've helped set this trend. To have them be a part of our event today really means a lot. Mr. Anthony Prozzi, this one's super interesting with a design background, a keen understanding of the fashion space, now working at Ford and taking the car industry to the next level and really implementing his style. And I save maybe my dearest friend up here for last because a true industry expert, really a legend in the space, someone when I met, I wanted to meet, and when I met him, I just couldn't believe it. Now I get to call this guy a friend. I actually ran into him at dinner last night at Soho House, and he said to me, just gave me this look, and he said, all those other media companies, they're talking about this, but you guys are doing it. And the only reason we're able to do this, Tom, is because people like you are a part of it. And again, the caliber of people that are here, including you guys, are what makes this so special. So big round of applause. This is going to be an amazing panel.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's lovely to see you all, and it's a real honour to be here alongside these gentlemen. We're going to talk for about half an hour about the anatomy of fashion, but we might not. The conversation will go wherever the hell it wants to. And I want to encourage everyone here to ask questions, because it will be terribly dull if it's just us four spouting off. So please, if one of us says something you don't agree with, put up your hand and tell us, and we'll certainly be coming to you for questions later on. So I could spend half an hour introducing everyone, but I won't, because I think you're more interested in them talking about fashion. So let's start with Fashion Week. It's just around the corner. In fact, for some of us, it already started. For you, it's consuming your life. Fashion Week's very different now. It used to be that it was very closed. None of us lot could go. It was just for the editors and for the buyers, and they saw what they wanted, and then 6 months later you could buy it in the stores. But it's not like that anymore, and half the people in here are probably going to go and see runway shows. It's not that difficult to get in, and if you can't get in, you can see it online. So it's changed the whole paradigm of what Fashion Week means. Tom, let's start with you. You've written about this and talked about this of late. What are your feelings about how it's changing and whether it's a good thing?
Well, I think that the anatomy of fashion, which is the subject, you have to take a second to see why it's changing before you talk about Fashion Week. Because what's happened is, brands used to take themselves to market after they manufactured the brand by setting up their showrooms, going to trade shows, doing fashion shows, and that's how they communicated to the press, right? And the press would decide what actually made it to a consumer. and the retailers, the buyers, would decide what they were going to buy. Someone was speaking about this before, and they would buy their collections, and then they would decide what's going to the consumer. So, the purpose of the fashion show was to show the editors and the buyers what was available, right? Or directionally what was available. What's changed as a result of technology, you have the opportunity to go direct to the consumer. So I think it's still evolving. I don't necessarily think there's a good or bad. I don't think it's landed yet. I think, Rassi, who's sitting next to me, is one of the people that's pushing it. But, the reality of it is, fashion shows are a B2B conversation first. And the reason they're a B2B conversation first is because more money's being made right now in the B2B area than it is going directly to the B2C, and tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. But what we're seeing is a reimagination of this, and as we go direct to the consumer, I think we're also going to see significant implications with the supply chain. And having to respond quicker. Someone again.
No, I would question there whether they really are B2B, meaning business to business, because it's just marketing now. It's just no buyer goes to a runway show to actually buy anything. They do that in the showroom later on, because you probably can't buy half the stuff on the runway anyway. So Rassi, you're making a big dent in what Fashion Week means. It used to be tied up at Bryant Park in the tents, and that was what you had to do. But 6 seasons ago, you launched frankly, what you could describe a rival Fashion Week, or at least a rival venue, Milk Studios, now made. And today you launched an app, which is giving people incredible new access to what's going on the runway. So whether or not it's a good thing, I don't know. But do you want to talk a little bit about why you did this?
Sure. Make sure you download the app. Basically, when we started, we really didn't even think about fashion. It was just about doing things differently and working with designers who were architects and artists, and they could do installations. We found the runway idea and what everyone talked about so boring. So we found these like-minded designers. I think back in the day it was like Alexander Wang, Parenza, Joseph Altazar, all these just really cool kids that were always part of the milk culture. And we gave them a space to create things that showed their clothes and how they sell it completely different. And it just began spiraling sort of into control. And all this, today we have, in 7 days, we have over 50 events. We have over 40 designers showing, all free of charge to the designer. Because we want it to be a community aspect and not a tent that you rent. So what they do is they come there and they create. And we ask a lot of them. We ask them that it's not just during Fashion Week, that's a year-long commitment, that we make things and we make content, we make e-commerce ideas, but it all comes together because there's so much more to fashion. There's music, there's pop culture, there's making films, there's, which is a whole genre we call fashion film now, which is just a glorified music video. But really, it's this whole new platform. So it's creating multiple medias from multiple platforms all at once.
So can I just check? Did you just refer to New York Fashion Week as a tent that you rent?
No.
Sorry.
No, what I meant was that Fashion Week was always about, designers would look at it as putting a collection together, putting their whole ideas, and then going and finding a space to do it in.
Yeah.
And what we tried to do is say, it's not about 4 walls at Milk, it's about this whole infrastructure we have here. Go grab a camera and make a film. Go grab some lights and make your own lighting idea. And so it wasn't just mainly about fashion, it was about creativity.
Yeah.
So we created a movement. But then we also realized, after that became successful and in our 6th season, we realized that the actual business of fashion was also a little bit archaic. So our app, what we did is it's like my wife's a fashion editor, and she goes to see a show. She takes the sheet of paper on the seat that has all the looks on it. She scribbles her notes. She takes an iPhone, takes a few pictures of the looks she likes. Then they're never that great, so her assistant has to go to style.com and download the real thing. And then she gives all this stuff to her assistant. Her assistant runs back to the office, takes her notes, puts it against the look, and then puts it on her email so it's searchable. So what we decided to do is, looking at her frustration during Fashion Week, is we built an app that's a tool. So the minute a model walks off the runway, within 10 steps, it's shot into everyone's device. From that point, you can tweet the look, you can make it your favorite, you can take notes, and then at the end of the show, you just email it to yourself.
Rassi, is that only for the people who are in the show, or is it for consumers as well?
No, if you watch live stream, which is a wonderful partner who does all the shows free of charge to the designers, and you have the app open and you live in Ohio, we will take over your device and the same content you'll be able to do.
So how do the designers feel about getting knocked off?
Well, haven't we moved
Wait, say
beyond
that again?
I mean, these days you can see everything all the time anyway.
I don't think we've. I think counterfeiting, knocking off is still a pretty big issue.
Oh no,
for
no,
designers.
I mean, it's. But
Well, that happens regardless. Really, what we try to do is build a tool for editors and buyers to pick their favorite looks and just talk about it and build an online community about it and to just streamline this process of being able to just pick. So an editor from a magazine like you ran would just want to see what she's going to pull for a shoot or what she wants to talk about. A buyer is going to look at those favorite looks and go, this is what I want to buy.
So
there wasn't a real process to do that. So our app basically does that. And we do it through sound. So we send a high frequency sound through the show space that only your device can hear. So if you walk into the Suno show, your app turns to Suno and all the looks start loading in as the model's in front of you.
So I want to move just outside of pure fashion for a moment and bring Anthony in. Anthony, you design the interiors of cars, amongst other things. So, but no one can be unaware of the influence fashion has to a greater or lesser degree. How much attention do you pay to it, and what kind of influence does it have in your area of design?
Well, I mean, what these gentlemen are in the business is of storytelling. What is the message and what's the story? And let's face it, now more than ever, if there isn't a compelling story, what is that human element behind what we create, then it's useless. And we look to what, not just fashion, but architecture, societal trends, all the things that Cheryl had spoken about earlier, to get that feel, to put our finger on the pulse of what's happening. So in the words of trickling up or trickling down, we look to, well, is this trend or is this something that is truly changing the value system, of the world as a whole? And then we apply that. So in the example of Ford Fusion, we knew that everyone wanted this concept of choice. And how do you take that and all these values that people are looking for and then package it in a three-dimensional form that speaks to all these aspirations that signal quality and consciousness and doing what is the right thing. And I think from what you're doing with Milk and bringing all this access to everyone holds people like us accountable for delivering on that message and on that promise. And as designers and creators of all that, we have to hold ourselves accountable and responsible for that as well. It's no longer a question of talking the talk. You have to walk that walk.
So I think there's a really interesting question here, which is, with all the opportunities for the public to see what's going on the runway, and then to actually, one might argue, to influence it by buying or voting favourite or whatever it is, then it's easy for a designer or a corporation to actually figure out what's popular. So navy blazers, that's what
the public's going to tell you what they want.
Yeah,
and they're very clear if they don't like something.
But the point I want to make is that many of us, I'm sure, saw Savage Beauty in the summer. I don't think Alexander McQueen gave a fuck about what was the public thought about his work, and nor should he have done. So are we in a better position as designers because we get feedback directly from the public, or are we just selling more stuff?
It's a very good point, because while we were building this app and this tool, one of the things we didn't realize is that the analytics we would get back, and do we share that with the designers? Do we say to the designers after the whole week, these 650 editors favored these looks? And obviously you will share it with them if they want, but it's funny that you say that, because there was a few of our designers that don't want to see the analytics. They don't want that to shape perhaps what their creative identity is. But it is there now, and it's not going to reverse, and it is instant, and he's going to know now if a girl in Indiana favors one of those looks.
Yeah, but you have to, all fashion's not created equal, right? You know, this is a highly segmented business. So when you're talking about McQueen, you know, you're talking about art. You know, it's like a Balenciaga sleeve. You know, there's something that goes on there that, you know, does get curated by people who know, who do have a reference point. I think as you go down the food chain into more popular democratic fashion, then I think crowdsourcing is a great tool, not unlike any other tool, you know?
So I used to be a designer. I spent 20 years, and I find the whole concept of it repugnant. Seriously, because I think if you're a designer, you've spent your whole career, I shouldn't have an opinion because I'm the moderator, sorry, but you've spent your whole career learning to design, to pick up on what's going on. So it's the eternal argument of the merchandiser versus the designer.
Yeah, and my point is, I think at the high side of things, I think the designers aren't going to care. But I think as you get down to the top shops of the world and you know, and the more mainstream brands, there's no reason why you wouldn't use market research.
Taking that to its logical extent, then we're going to all eat the McDonald's of clothing.
No.
Because they've got the most numbers.
You got it all wrong. I mean, you're thinking artist versus design versus commerce versus what is consumer behavior and purchasing power. I mean, it's a holistic experience. You know,
the world assumes consumers would choose McDonald's. We're saying the consumers are choosing.
There's another.
Consumers do choose
but hold on. There's another point. The designers that we're also talking about, they're from a different generation, and for them, technology and the feedback doesn't affect them the same way that it perhaps will affect you, because they're used to living with feedback instantly. So when we started doing all this when we started bringing this different idea to them, we knew who we were going to. They're very young, they're very cool, they grew up differently, they don't want to be Calvin Klein's and they don't want to be Ralph Lauren's. They want to be Alexander Wang's. And they're just, technology is a big part of what they do. Music, art. So what happens is this kind of feedback doesn't affect them the same way that it would affect if somebody went and gave, you know, Vera Wang all this analytic. I think that they would know what to do with that. So it is true about what segment of designers we're dealing with.
Yeah, and Simon, don't forget, I mean, it's truly a brave new world. Because of things like apps, the same sort of visual stimulation that we're experiencing here in New York, our counterpart, you know, around the globe, be it Shanghai, Moscow, wherever, they're also visualizing and reacting to that same
So that's a great point, and I shouldn't admit to it, but we had a bit of a pre-conversation, and we were talking about certain products being appropriate now globally. And in the past, that you would have had to have developed something completely new for Shanghai, and I certainly have a point of view on that. But Anthony, why don't you speak a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, what we were referring to is this concept of global design convergence. And in fashion, I mean, it was there. You know, when a designer presents a collection, it's one collection. And regardless if it's shown in New York, Milan, Paris, London, you know, around the globe, people will react to it. And then through, you know, individual style and how a buyer will, you know, find it appropriate for their shop, they'll reinterpret it. I think what that's done is it's brought, you know, a solution much closer to one specific product. So in my industry, with something like an automobile, we can produce one car, you know, one specific car, be it Fiesta, Focus, Fusion, and introduce it globally, and it is the right answer. Now, is that good or bad? You know, that's not for me to decide. You know, as a designer, I present it, and I let the consumer. That's not the point. The point is we're giving, you know, the consumer that choice, and that's why someone will prefer, you know, an Alexander Wang versus, you know, Parenzo Scholler, whatever, you know. And it's our industry and our obligation as the designers and the creators of these to present those specific point of views. What I'm saying is that the way we do it, the process in which we create, in which we design, is being affected by all this visual stimulation, not only in society and culture, but the things that we see will be coming. And as designers, we all have that sixth sense. We all sort of live, you know, in the future, and we envision the future first. And we decide which way things will take shape. You know, I live in I grew up in New York. I live in Detroit. And everyone says, you know, Detroit's got a bad rap, but it's the youth of the world that's been coming in and redefining and rebuilding everything.
So, Tom, if you could sell the same, when you were publishing at Conde Nast, if you could sell the same Vogue magazine all around the world, that would be a lot more efficient, wouldn't it? That would be much more profitable.
No, not necessarily. If we could bundle the advertising, it could.
Yeah.
But no, you know, China Vogue. I think part of the genius of China Vogue is it was a Vogue created for people in China, you know, and rather than, you know, sending our Vogue over there. So no, I think you know, the idea of being consistent in the quality of what it represented was really important. But I think the magazine should speak to its individual market.
And Ari's going to, I think, get some questions from the audience. But I just want to ask you, Rassi. Okay. So, well, let me inappropriate question.
You know, guys control the industry when they have to tell secrets about it. They're allowed to talk about
on
something
stage
at the conference, all right?
So, Rassi has Milk Studios here, which I'm sure we're all very familiar with, and Milk Studios in LA, and Made, the Fashion Week thing, is here. But I know that there's been talk about doing it in Paris, and I'm just interested in what the essential differences would be, because I'm all about one size doesn't fit all.
Well, the idea originally was like, do you take our designers and then take them to Paris in a limited group and continue? But going back to our roots, we realized Milk has always been a platform for the emerging artists. It's always about the next generation. The idea of Milk is that every 4 years we kind of take it and we give it to the next group of people, and then we kind of look at them and say, take good care of it. And then in 4 years, they give it to the next generation. So it's this idea rather than a company. But Made Fashion Week is the same thing. So if we do go to Paris, the idea is we go to Paris, we do the same thing. We find like-minded people there, designers that need a platform, and we find great partners to be able to be with us. So we are going to do a few little events in Paris throughout the year, and then hopefully, if all goes well and we raise the funds we need to, we'll be in Paris this September. And we're really excited about that because all of a sudden it becomes a global idea. And, you know, and Made Fashion Week is, we also are starting a music program. So we also are starting an art program. At Milk we already have a photography program. So it can lend itself to many, many things. I think we learned a lot we were very lucky to work with Vice magazine helping create the Creators Project. And so we learned very quickly that is really the idea, is to take amazing brands like Intel in that case, build this incredible infrastructure to have all these amazing artists and musicians play. So Made is kind of our little Creators Project.
So we can talk all day, and I have no idea where the conversation will go, but I'm really interested if there's any questions from the audience. Yeah, there's a hand straight up in the middle. That's a really good question. For those who didn't hear, we've been talking about elements of the industry, but we haven't mentioned the press. And the question is, why is the press irrelevant? How many people here are from the press, and how many are independent bloggers? So press, a few. Independent bloggers, maybe the same, maybe a little bit more. I think the fact that that's the way the conversation went is telling in itself.
I think we're at a digital conference, and that's the way you took it. I think the press is very relevant.
I think press is...
And I think Anna Wintour would be in the front row if you clouded it, you know? Because clout's about influence, but you gave that question to somebody else.
I think press is super important. Like, even as sort of open source, you know, the more we bring innovation and technology and fashion together, it has to be open source. We met with media partners who keep talking about exclusive this, exclusive that. It was really amazing to sit in a meeting and go, we don't believe in exclusivity. We believe in open source. And they didn't have to rethink why they need to be involved. And we need press. Like we have PR consulting that does all our press at Made Fashion Week. You need them because strategically, it's important, no matter where your message goes, that there is a real message, and the message is refined and right to the point. So press is more important today for for creating the message rather than getting the message out. Because any brand today to be successful, I don't care if you sell cars or anything or you sell tractors, you have to be a media company first. You have to have your own channel. You have to build a community, because community is active. Customers are passive. So Apple doesn't have customers, they have community. And so what we always try to do with all the brands we work with at Meld is to build a channel for them. And the message is very important. That's created by the press initiative. But I think what's more importantly is once you turn that faucet on and you create a channel for a brand and it's their outlet and they start building a community, you have to feed that community. That community, you have to create content for them. You have to give them exclusive stuff on even though we don't believe in exclusivity, but you have to give them things that they have to eat. And companies don't realize sometimes when they build a channel, they can't turn it off. It's forever. You have to keep it going. So brands in general are going through this really amazing, especially in fashion, there's no more doing one-offs. It's building programs. And that sometimes, we always say it's 99% education, 1% sales when we go out, because the entire environment has changed.
I would put the editors in the same class as the designers as well, in that I would find myself trying to defend them. Because it's one thing for the public to vote on their favourite dress, but I'm not really that interested. I'm interested in what Anna Wintour's favourite dress is and why. Because she spent 30 years amassing a body of knowledge that gives her a point of view that's frankly different to someone that just switched on their computer that day.
Yeah, but Simon, I have to add, I personally feel that consumers have become press. I mean, there's a kabillion social media websites, so that the one person, I met Willie Green earlier, who, I was blown away. I mean, here's this young man who has such a sharp point of view. And how did, how did he harvest all that knowledge, and then present it, at such an amazingly, young age? So I really believe that consumers are becoming the next press. I mean, press gives us, pedigree and the provenance. But in the end, it's the consumer and their viewpoint that's going to make your product successful or not.
Yeah, successful meaning you sell more of them, not necessarily it's a better design, though.
Well, in the end, a dress is a dress, but if it just sits on the rack, what's its point?
Mm. Any more questions? Another question? Yes.
It'll be fun now. So what's more important, the art or the money?
I think both.
I think it
Depends who you
on who you
are.
are. I think really, I would think that most of these young designers that are coming up, when they started it because they were passionate and they were talented and they became successful at what they did, therefore they made money. I would say going into the fashion business purely to make money in the beginning, you're going to be roadkill.
Yeah, I can tell you right now, I've got 1,600 students studying fashion in my school, and there's not a single one of them that's doing it because they think they're going to make loads of money. Not even one of them. Every single one of them wants to be a fashion designer. And I'll go further.
There's artistry involved in this game, at least at the time.
Yeah, if they wanted to make money, they'd be bankers. Not now, actually.
So with this new generation of artists and designers, how important now will social media kind of, play into that, and to help build their own brand right from the get-go, so that they can kind of create their own following?
I think, speaking as, again, because I'm surrounded by a lot of young people, they don't know about life without social media. So, and one of the things that I find really intriguing about 18 to 22-year-olds is that they just don't have to unlearn all the things that we crusty old geezers have to unlearn. They're not learning to use Twitter because there was never a time when there wasn't Twitter for them. Facebook is like the telephone for us. I mean, they just don't know what it means to not have that. So when we see them, they don't think, oh, I'll be a designer and then I'll use all these other things, because the whole thing is seamless. And just in the way that Rassi's built his company at Milk, this seamless integration of all the different disciplines.
Yeah.
All right, let's do one more question. This has been amazing. Let's do one more awesome question. Somebody jump out of their seat and say, I can't wait to ask a question. Tom Florio is my hero. Come on. Jump out of the seat. Just make it enthusiastic.
Front row.
I have a question.
There she is.
Since all of you are very creative and influencers in your own right, what is your most favorite source of
Go ahead, Tom.
Go, Tom.
No pressure.
As it relates to business, I tend to follow value systems. I try to find what I believe is an emerging value system, and a value system that I think has been adopted by the culture and is going to grow over time. And then depending on the brand I'm working on, try to drill down on the DNA of the brand, which is kind of a cliche, but then, move it with a certain modernity into that value system. So I think that, fashion is an emotional business. I used to say, when I tried to explain it to people that don't know, I'd say, how guys watch sports and think they're jocks? Even if they can't run or swim or anything, they all think they're jocks, Women engage in fashion and think they're fashionable. They take in all that media, and it's a cultural thing. So I think, it is sociological, and that's what I look for, and that's what inspires me.
Anthony, where do you look for inspiration?
I travel a lot. I think for someone to just sit, in their little studio and think that they have a pulse on the world is insane. You have to experience people, you meet people, and they'll tell you. I mean, as a designer, I have to sort of, reinterpret that to get a sense of what's next. But, the youth of the world is where I look to inspiration. I mean, they're inheriting, the mess that, old guys, have done. So, they're going to solve it, and they're telling you, and they're showing you the way.
Rassi, would you say that children are our future?
Well, I know that song. I think what inspires me, and I think it did from there, it's the city. It's like New York City. I always say to all our employees at Milk that we have an obligation and a responsibility to this town to do great things, like the guys that walk in the streets before us, like the Basquiats and the architects that built these buildings. So New York City is why we always work so hard to sort of break the barriers and do something that, the guys that were in our shoes 20 years ago, 40 years ago, would be proud of us. And when we go and open in LA, we take one block of New York and we put it in LA. And because that energy is so incredible, there's no other city like this in the world. So I think that for me, it's always been this town.
I think my answer to that would be pretty much along those lines. My inspiration is everywhere and everything and everybody. Because if you don't walk around with your eyes open, like for instance on this panel, I didn't do any prep for the panel. Because if I prep for it, but if there's an example, if you prep for it, then you already know where you're going to go, and that's boring. So I had no idea what these guys were going to say. I got no idea what the questions were going to be, and that makes it interesting. That's where you get inspiration. So that, and looking around, and the building, and the people, and the cars, and the conversation, and the music, and the fashion, it's everywhere.
And this town allows you to look at yourself and go, you know what? It's finally our turn. It's our time to change things. And I think that's what's so special about it. No matter what initiative or ideas we have, it's like, if it's not our time, we won't do it. But lately, we've always felt like we paid our dues. We skateboarded to work. We had mustard sandwiches for weeks when we first moved here. I mean, we were broke. We did it. It's our turn. We have nothing to apologize for. Let's make it better. And I think what's really great is when we meet all the new generation of people, bloggers, designers, we all get it. We look at each other, one sense, we know. We're inspired. And now it's like we push each other to do great stuff.
Guys, let me just jump in here real quick and say something. When you hear us talk about the state of style, and you hear us say things like style to the people, and you hear us say things about the counterpoint narrative of Fashion Week and advancing the conversation forward, this is what the fuck I'm talking about. These guys are the guys that are taking this industry to the next level, and it's an honor to have you guys here. I'd appreciate maybe our first standing round of applause for these guys, because this is awesome.
And thank you, Ari, for doing it.
Thank you, Ari.